welcome Kate from Speckle. I'm really excited to have you on. I feel very advanced and up with the times on the Geospatial Index. The best I've been able to do so far with a file-free method of data transfer is using the ArcGIS for AutoCAD plugin. So this is the next level for me, and I hope some of our loyal listeners. Could we please get straight into it with the elevator pitch for Speckle?
All right, thank you for the introduction. I'm very happy to be here too. Yeah, the advanced GIS integrations are not only fresh for you, fresh for many users. So I am going to make a brief introduction in what Speckle platform is in general, and then maybe go into more details about how it helps integrate particularly geospatial data. So please let me know if you can see the presentation, and then I will proceed.
Yep, it's up.
All right. So it is really difficult to describe in one sentence what Speckle is, but I try my best. It's a platform for 3D data, but in fact, it is many different things inside of it. So starting with a brief introduction of why it's appeared. The Speckle product is basically a product of the PhD of Dimitri's research at UCL. It was growing organically for many years, already getting some kind of user base. I was also using some of the separate Speckle algorithms at that point to integrate Rhino and Unity because there was no other options simply. In 2018, 2019, it started getting adopted by larger AEC companies, and in 2020, it became officially a company. And the team working on Speckle is really distributed. There is no central office. People are joining from different countries, from different time zones. And yep, the mission of Speckle is to enable everyone to speak in 3D, which is a big challenge at the moment because the 3D software support very different so-called languages, and there is not that many widely adopted options to find a universal language for it. The Speckle addresses several issues in the industry, and one of those is that the data in the industry is very fragmented. The data is distributed and stored in silos with very little opportunities for collaboration and automation. The software are proprietary, the formats are proprietary, and it also limits many beneficial options to share data between the project, between the companies. And also current solutions are slow, are not moving at a very fast pace, and the companies itself are not moving at a very fast pace technology-wise. The technologies are moving, but the processes are not, I would say. Yeah, there is three major parts to Speckle infrastructure. One part is the connectors that are providing interoperability between different software. The second part is collaboration and Speckle Web, which is a management system for the data, for your servers, for permissions and access. And the last part, at least for now, is the automation and development platform, which allows developers or the users or engineers within the company to build their own apps or their own custom solutions specific to the project or specific to the company. And yeah, so the first part, the connectors, is basically the plugins for different software. It can be a plugin or interfaces. It can be a plugin for Rhino, QGIS, Revit, and so on. It can be illustrated very briefly or in some simplified way how the data workflow can work between, in this example, Rhino and Revit. You can share your model by uploading on the server, and the other user can download it from the server. Once you have any changes or updates, you refresh and upload the new version, and the user on the other side can get the new version instantly. Some engineering behind it is basically each app or each connector, which is the interface inside the software, is getting the native the model in the native format from the software, converting it to the shared schema that is custom for Speckle objects, serializing and sending to the Speckle server, and then in the reverse way, the data can be received, deserialized, and converted to the new native format of the new app. Some of the bits and pieces of Speckle that you might need or might not need, but it's convenient to have, is a desktop manager, which is a management system for all the connectors that you might want to install, upgrade, uninstall, the accounts, the servers, and so on. There are the connectors themselves. The list is huge and it's growing really fast. The connectors started being developed by the Speckle developers, but then the community joined, and now there is already a growing list of connectors that developed by the community, like TopSolid, Advanced Steel, and several others. Yeah, so the GIS connector, let's say, is just the widget inside the QGIS interface, which lets you interact with the data from Speckle servers, upload the data, create the projects, send data and receive data from the projects. How the workflow generally works is that you have your plugin inside your favorite software. You're sending your model or the version of your model to the Speckle server. Each model is being attributed to a specific project, or in formerly called a stream, which is following GitHub terminology. And
yes,
yeah.
I heard about the recent change in those names.
Yeah. That's debatable. There will be always a happy crowd and a sad crowd. I think the idea behind renaming it into a less developer-oriented language is that not all AC professionals are developers, and it's not extremely intuitive to start. Yeah, but I think it will be easy to, to get used. So yeah, every project or stream can have different models. You might have a model of your master plan or model of a structural model. And every of those models can have different versions that you can update from one or different softwares and receive in one and different softwares. Everything is stored and tracked, and you can easily trace what have changed by whom and at what time. Every time the data is uploaded to the server, it can be instantly viewed online in a 3D format, but also in the data view format. You can explore particular elements, attributes that you need. And at any point, you can retrieve the data from the server by getting another connector in the same or other software and using the receive option. The second part of the Speckle infrastructure is the collaboration Speckle Web. And basically, it's everything that you can find on the website. It's a lot of things. It's a project management interface, plus the 3D viewer to explore your data, plus the settings to control the access and control the permissions, plus the system to track the versioning system of your project, and use existing or build custom dashboards by seeing the timeline of each project, or by having an overview of all the projects and models within it. The 3D viewer is one of the best parts of Speckle. It's not only shows the data, and now even with better and better qualities like shading and transparency, you can also set the filters to it to make visible or highlight specific elements. You can share those views with the filters applied with other users. You can do also multiple other things using the viewer, which I might show a bit later. And the permission system which allows you to add collaborators of different levels, contributors, reviewers, and the owners. The viewer also allows you to leave the comments on the model and resolve the comments. So you can select specific object and a specific camera view to leave the comment and maybe tag the other person, and then that person or anybody else who has access to the model can go and see the comment and see that something there requires attention. Another really nice feature is a synchronized views. So basically, instead of people telling, let me share my screen, and then trying to go over, and the other person would say, wait, can you move it a little bit? You can both join the same view, and you can follow each other while exploring the model, and basically have this, like, being in the same sort of virtual space where you see what the other person sees exactly. And another version of the same 3D viewer is the presentation mode, which basically allows you to build some sort of presentation from the comments. And I think that's really, really, really amazing. I would love to have that when I was a student, to avoid the renders and other types of presentation tools. You can literally use your existing model. You can switch the visibilities on and on. You can build a story around it, and you can share it either as a link, or you can also embed it into the PowerPoint. And yeah, a big advantage of the web viewer, at least with the geoinformation systems, is that it can handle much larger volume of the data. So this visualization I made using GIS data imported into Rhino or Grasshopper, and it took me 1 week to visualize about a couple of years ago, and with the web viewer connected directly to the GIS data, that would take minutes. And the last part, the automation and development platform, is providing the several SDKs for developers to build the tools on top of it, which are based on C#, Python, and JavaScript. It's basically this is the system that allows you to build custom connectors to any types of software with API based on C#, Python, or JavaScript. They also allows you to interact with any types of data from the server, to retrieve the data, to send the data, to subscribe to the events or updates on the server. Yeah, so this is an example of the tool built using Speckle, using the web queries from a specific model. It's, if I'm not mistaken, the carbon calculator, which basically gets into the properties of all the objects uploaded to your model, getting the specific attributes, aggregating the attributes, and building the dashboard from these attributes. And another way of using the API is to build integration apps. For now, the Telegram and Discord are supporting this options. Even WhatsApp, I think, can also support it. So you can receive custom notifications from updating the project, updating the model, or somebody leaving the comment, and so on. You can also add as much data to your notifications as you want.
Thanks. That was mind-blowing. So the last point seemed to say that essentially I can subscribe to a model and get updates in whatever messaging app I choose, or at least one of the 3 popular ones.
Yeah, if the app allows you to build on top of it, like custom bots, then yes.
Okay. Well, yeah, that was the most comprehensive elevator pitch I've seen. In terms of the niche that you guys are occupying, there's many ways to look at it. I feel that a lot of the business models that exist in our industry are basically trying to capture some territory using a proprietary file system and software. And it almost feels as though the business people are separate from the technical people, if you like. And there's a part of the case for investors, I guess, in you know, any given software, a 3D authoring software, might be to try and grab as many users as you can and keep them locked into your file type or proprietary data type. So it looks like you guys have come along and blown that out of the water. Is that how you see yourselves? Are you, the one sort of integrator between all of these maybe older 3D systems?
Yeah, the thing is, it's getting harder and harder to lock users within the proprietary software, because even if not the major, I don't know, big startups or other companies are doing that, some smaller hackers will do that. So in one or another way, it will happen. And if it happens on a larger scale with a supportive community, and everyone involved in how it has to look like, which needs need to be addressed, that would be, of course, much more efficient and much more sustainable, because it's like, for example, the example with renaming the terminology from streams to project. It also didn't come from, let's say, the software engineers. It came from the industry need, because that's how industry operates better. So yeah, the fields that Speckle is targeting are mainly, well, it can be anything related to 3D types of data, but it was also born as a solution to for the AEC teams, because of very high inefficiency of existing interoperability solutions. But also because Speckle is not just trying to provide import-export options for as many software as possible, but it rather trying to build or improve the entire workflows between the teams or within the teams. The focus is on these workflows. So so far, the focus lies mainly on the industries related to engineering, construction, urban planning. Yeah, there is some requests on the community forums now and then about other types of 3D software for videos, for rendering. But as long as, I mean, they might be supported at some point, as long as they start fitting into these major workflows.
Yeah. No, it's really fantastic. I mean, the competitors, if I can put it that way, that spring to mind, that I've come across at least, is BIM 360. There's also the Autodesk Construction Cloud, and there's that ArcGIS for AutoCAD plugin that I mentioned before. Autodesk themselves have developed, I think, at least from version 2020 of Civil 3D, and maybe AutoCAD, their own sort of in-house connector that will go and allow you to browse the contents of Portal for ArcGIS or ArcGIS Online and bring those layers in as base layers under Civil 3D, whatever you're drawing there. But is it the case that Speckle is the most comprehensive? It connects the most platforms.
There are workarounds, and there are different scenarios that people would prefer special plugins over Speckle. For example, I mean, there are some questions that might answer whether you might want to look at Speckle or not. Is, for example, if these plugins, if you want to use the plugins, whether you only need to import or export data, whether you need to only have the data flow one way or both ways, or whether you need some extra management tools for your data. And then you can really compare, because the more people are involved, the more software are involved, the less chance, or the more chance that there will be something missing out of the custom plugins, and there is more chances that you might need to look for new solutions. So yeah, in some cases, Speckle would make life much easier.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. I mean, on your standard, engineering design project, you'll have, 5 or more disciplines, and yeah, I mean, you'll usually have, some sort of GIS software, Esri, QGIS, often Esri, some sort of Autodesk software, or maybe Bentley, and you might have another vendor for the document control, and often that document control system is based on files, not web services. Yeah, no, it's really fantastic what you guys are doing. All right, let's move on then to the next item. So you mentioned, and I love the fact that you had a map of where your team was distributed. So what's the skin in the game of the owners or management, and how is Speckle being funded?
So there are several parts to it. Speckle is both the product and the company. If we talk about the company, it's privately owned and funded by venture capital, and the business model as a software as a service. So the revenue is coming from hosting and managing Speckle servers. But also, of course, it's as successful as the product is. And currently the product is fully open source. It's under Apache 2 license, and anybody can, let's say, own it. Anybody can fork the code from GitHub, extend it, and even use for commercial purposes. So it's a very, very open model.
Okay, good. So you showed a number of different connectors and the fact that the community is already developing their own. For example, I remember seeing a couple that I think Arup, the engineering consultancy, had developed. One that was missing from your demo video, from what I could see, was the Esri or ArcGIS Pro connector, or just generally an Esri one. So I guess what this relates to is working backwards from customer needs. Are you constantly consulting with or analyzing the AEC industry to understand what the most popular software packages are, and therefore to understand which connectors you should be developing? Or generally, what is your process for working backwards from customer needs?
There is, I think, a model that Speckle was inspired by. That's the working backwards method from Amazon, meaning the envisioning the product first, all its benefits, the user, the problem it is solving, and working from that. But there's just like a conceptual basis to it. When it comes to the gathering the feedback from the community itself, there are also several channels. There is a community forum, which is the website with surprisingly a lot of active users that are constantly giving feedback. I mean, mainly reporting the bugs, but also giving some suggestions on the new feature, looking for the answers or replying even to other users. That helps to see the most popular requests and somehow prioritize them. Also, there are regular community stand-ups, which is a video call with the Speckle team and with the users. Anybody can join, where people get updated on what's been a work in progress, what is expected, new features, and sometimes users can also present what they have been developing and share with the community and get the feedback as well. And yeah, also Speckle has some close partnership with the AC organizations and startups that also rely on Speckle for the solutions. So there is multi-level channel of feedback, which helps to gather the user needs and then prioritize them and channel into the development sprints.
Yeah, sounds like there's a lot of activity for you guys there. Good. Okay, so I guess one way to measure your success in working backwards from user needs is to measure your growth. So how fast is user growth?
It seems to be fast. There is no complete picture that is visible because many Speckle servers are self-hosted. So there is all the data is stored completely with the proprietary server, and there is no way we can look into it. But there are other indicators that we can see. For example, the QGIS plugin manager has the statistics of votes and uploads, or the GitHub forks, or the community involvement on the forum and votes on the forum, and some other AEC blogs and posts. And there is increasing interest coming from all these channels. So I would say that indicates some user growth.
Sure. Okay. All right. So Speckle has a couple of geospatial software plugins. We've already discussed QGIS and Esri, I'll say. So which has been the most popular or resulted in the most enhancement requests?
Yes, then working from community requests has its pros and cons. So sometimes the community requests one thing, but then they don't use it. And that happens with the ArcGIS Pro plugin, let's say. There has been a poll at the community forum some time ago. I mean, quite some time ago, more than a year. And ArcGIS was the first or second most voted plugin. But somehow, I think also due to lots of other solutions that you have mentioned, the Autodesk plugins, it has not been that popular and there has not been that much feedback about it. On the contrary, the QGIS community has been growing and people constantly give feedback and give a request for the features and test the new workflows that I have not envisioned myself, and that really helps. So far, I would say QGIS is the most popular of the geospatial plugins, and yeah, there is still a lot to explore. The geospatial community is not the focus. It has not been the focus audience of Speckle from the very beginning. It's only recent, so yeah, I hope it will grow even faster.
Yeah, no, it's nice to have that comparison. So I first started playing around with BIM 360 when I was confronted with a structures design team using Revit. And because the way I try to do GIS as much as I can is to use web services and effectively try to subscribe to the outputs of all of the disciplines that we have to integrate into a single web map of, sort of showing the progress of design, for example, or the current status of a project. And there was a lot of digging around that I did with BIM 360. And there are some publishing workflows with a Revit file. There's a geoprocessing tool in ArcGIS Pro where you can convert a Revit file into a nice structure visualization, 3D, rotatable, etc. And also you can turn on and off the different layers of the building. But I couldn't seem to find a way to basically get Revit to produce effectively a web service like a WMS or a WFS or whatever other live means of getting the latest state of a design. So I don't know. And then looking at, I guess, the basic mechanics of Speckle, it looks like you still have to essentially push your design to the Speckle server, and then on the other side, you have to pull the design into whatever software you want. So in this case, Pro. I wonder if that's always going to be the case with Speckle, or if a next step might be that you simply get a web service that's a constantly updated stream of the state of the design as soon as, the designer hits save in Revit, if you know what I mean? Or is that not possible to really achieve?
Which other connectors have you tried so far?
I haven't, I confess I actually haven't. I've had a brief look at Speckle. I haven't tried it out, but just from my understanding of the principle, like maybe I'm not describing this right. So for example,
No.
yeah.
It's absolutely correct. It was a question with a trick because there is some function in several connectors, but they are not the geospatial ones. So there is two levels to the question, right? First, how to turn the model into the web service, and then whether it can streamline in kind of live mode, right? So one thing, yes, it is once it's uploaded to the server, it becomes in some way similar to web feature service, although it cannot it doesn't have a functionality to query the data before downloading the data. So the normal workflow would be to download the entire model and then filter it already there, because Web Feature Service has a very structured data set online, and that makes the querying much easier. Whether a Speckle structure doesn't make it very efficient to query before receiving. So that's one thing. But also the question about making it more live, update and live interaction. Yes, it's absolutely possible. The thing why it's not, let's say, sent constantly is it's more practical rather than technical limitation, because your model might be rather large. Your model might you might want to update only certain parts, not the entire model itself. So it's much more efficient to just click the button with the parts that you want to send an update. And on the other side of that, some of the connectors, for example, Rhino connector, does have implemented the auto update. So once once you update the model or send the new version of the model to the server from even Rhino, but other user or other project, you can immediately, you can have it automatically receive, and certain elements would be updated.
Perfect. So that's what I was looking for. Because even the BIM 360 solution, it just seemed to go in terms of files, you know, and it was just a web-based way. It was like a web browser for a file server. So I guess I'm more familiar with using the ArcGIS for AutoCAD plugin, and it's amazing. Like it's much less sophisticated than Speckle, but I love the look on engineers' faces when I show them how they can just edit a web feature service in Civil 3D, and they can also bring in all the service. They can basically make their own version of the web map that we have in Portal for ArcGIS. You know, I'm talking generically here, anybody who has access to Esri Enterprise. So one really cool benefit with the plugin is they can just remake the project's web map as their base map in Civil 3D or AutoCAD. But then if you publish it as a feature layer, they can bring that in, edit that, and when they hit sync, it then immediately propagates back to the project web map. So everybody across the project can immediately see it. And crucially, the administrator of that web map doesn't have to hit sync on their side. Yeah, it's just immediately propagates straight in. And you can go even further if you're using built-in accounts to essentially publish links to those services onto other organizations' Esri Enterprise systems. So you can have a daisy chain of propagating from that editor in Civil 3D to the organization's Esri Enterprise map, and through linked services and built-in accounts into other. And that's all without, it all propagates from the editor clicking sync in the plugin. So it's nice to know that a similar effect could happen, or auto updates essentially could happen for the client side of the structure for Speckle.
Yeah, it has not been a big topic yet in QGIS, because we might need some more user cases. It's a nice to have, of course, but as long as there is no user that comes and describe why it is useful and in which way, yeah, I think it would be better to develop the feature once there is a specific use case for it.
Yeah, I mean, I could see it as a way for a huge number of projects and professionals, especially who are locked into the Esri enterprise world, because from my use of the geoprocessing tool for a Revit file, you're looking at about 10 minutes of time every time you've got a new revision. So if you can remove that, and if you consider on a reasonable sized project, you'll have, you know, upwards of maybe 50 models, and each of those has 3 revisions. Suddenly that 10 minutes times 150, you know, you've got a significant impact on the budget. So if there could be a clearly described workflow for replacing that 10 minutes of effort with each new revision with a Speckle server solution that auto updates, into, similar to the behavior of some sort of web feature service or web mapping service, a fire and forget solution, if you like. Yeah, I can see Speckle really taking off in that context.
In one way, yes, absolutely, and that's why soft connectors like Rhino do have support for that. And what we also notice is most users use it only one way. So let's say QGIS data into Rhino or QGIS data into Revit, to use it mainly as a contextual model. So yeah, there has been no cases that I'm aware so far that someone has tried to update and load multiple Revit models into your GIS file. But if it happens, I will be really happy to look into it.
Yeah, I mean, the standard setup would be straight into an SDE somehow, or basically, often with a SQL Server database backend. I don't know. Anyway, don't want to get too far into the weeds, but yeah. Okay, cool. At least we've discussed. That was the main thing that's motivated me even to find out about Speckle. And yeah, so yeah, okay. All right, so how fast does Speckle Server operate? For example, how many gigabytes would you recommend using it for in data transfers, or what size of file will cause it to fall over?
It's a good question. It has been proven very fast. And it also depends which server you're using. There is an open or kind of public server, Speckle XYZ. It is fast, but also main feature of the speed of increasing speed is not. It's because it's not sending the file itself. The file that can be a gigabyte or several gigabytes, it's serializing the data and sending only the necessary data to the server. That the size is decreasing a lot, and this makes the transfer much faster. But there are some limitations to it. Let's say there is a limitation for the maximum size of the individual object that can be sent to the server, but there is no limitation to the number of objects that you can attach to your model. So QGIS in this sense has really pushed these limitations, because individual objects in QGIS can be a boundary of Germany, or let's say a raster layer covering Australia. So those types of individual objects do hit the limitations, but either we might find some workaround to split it into parts, or custom for like this kind of edge cases. The custom server would just really solve this problem very easy.
Okay, that's good to know. Okay, so my next question is about 3D data transfers, which is what Speckle is all about, but specifically for geospatial software. So, for example, multi-patches extruded between a couple of surfaces in ArcGIS Pro. Can I push those back and forth using Speckle?
Yeah, the plugins for exporting Revit models into, the point is to make the experience for the user as familiar as possible. So the most close experience for, let's say, ArcGIS Pro users is to use the plugin for importing Revit models. And Revit models in this case are imported into a shape of multi-patches. So taking that into account, Speckle is using conversions that convert in the 3D models as multi-patches, because users are already familiar with this format. And yes, the data can be received with all the 3 dimensions. In ArcGIS, it's very easy also to view because it has an advanced 3D viewer. In QGIS, it's a bit more tricky. You might receive the data and not being aware that it's even 3D. But once you go into the new 3D view and make sure that the symbology for the 3D view has been properly set up, because it's not by default in QGIS, then you can see that the model has all the dimension it had before. Sometimes the 3D viewer for QGIS doesn't handle well Speckle models, because it has multiple tiny details, and sometimes the meshes are even going beyond the tolerance point of the coordinate reference system. So the viewer might have it look slightly distorted, but once you send it or you view it in the 3D viewer, web viewer from Speckle, that you can see that all information is there.
So we've already started to discuss the contrast between WFSs, web feature services, web mapping services, Esri REST services. And we've talked about how in the regular setup with Speckle, the user must issue push or pull requests to get updates. And you said that at least for Rhino, you can remove the need to issue these pull requests. So if we were to try to create a solution for a common workflow, especially on an engineering design project where you've got a geospatial team who's trying to keep up with the structures team, for example, by visualizing in a 3D web map using Esri Enterprise, the structures, say the bridges or the buildings. How far are we away using Speckle to get the spontaneous behavior of data coming through without a pull request, if I am making any sense? Is there further custom work that would have to be done?
Could you rephrase
Yeah,
it?
maybe
The
I'm not
last
making
part?
sense.
Do you mean any specific software or specific workflow?
The best way I can put it is, for example, for, the country where you're working, there will be a government geological survey or service. And typically they have, web mapping services of the geological structures, at the location where you're doing your engineering project. And the standard part, I bet, at any engineering firm for any geospatial team on any of these projects will be, as part of the initial data collection process, they will go to the library of web mapping service URLs from the country's geological survey, and they will get this WMS and stick it in the web map, and there is no further intervention from them. So if the government updates the geological data, it will come through in the WMS the next day or immediately as soon as it's updated on the government side. So I'm looking for the same functionality for structures in the context of somebody administering a web map using Esri Enterprise. From what I understand, that functionality doesn't yet exist with Speckle.
Okay, I think I got it more or less. So using the Speckle models and the web as a web map service is not something implemented yet, but it's something we've been thinking about, turning the model into more like a base map or the tiles, right?
Yeah, sorry. And maybe I shouldn't have used because I don't think you can really bring 3D structures through in WMSs. Maybe a WFS is, can you bring?
Well, the Cesium has already issued 3D tiles, so everything's
Right.
possible.
Same idea. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's something to look into. Absolutely, I think that's super exciting idea. And if let's say the organization already wants this kind of workflow, that is a really easy minor hack into the connector to automatically open a certain version of the model and automatically import it every time you open the file. So I don't think that will be implemented at the connector level because not everybody might want that feature. But if somebody really needs it, I think that should be really a minor intervention.
Cool. Okay. All right. Hopefully that's enough in terms of clues for people who have this remarkably unique and specific request. So I'll move on from that. Okay. So finally, to cover off the geospatial aspects before a couple of product manager questions at the end. So where ArcGIS Online or Portal for ArcGIS exist, Why should AutoCAD users try Speckle instead of the ArcGIS for AutoCAD plugin or Autodesk connector for ArcGIS?
Well, they don't have to, but it's recommended. I mean, as I think I mentioned before, the questions will be really what are the tasks that needs to be accomplished, and what if it's just the import and export. There is, especially if people are familiar with those plugins, I think it can be easier. But if they want to expand the flow to more people, more software, more types of data management, then Speckle would be very handy in that case.
Okay, sure. Yeah, that's the standard one. So it can go out to all the other disciplines with all their other software packages, not just ones who are running things with Esri software. Sure. Okay. So does your team have a product manager role? And if yes, what contribution does this role make to your team? If no, how are you able to meet user needs effectively without it?
Well, the product manager role indeed emerged not very long ago, because there was a clear need to manage things better, because the team is growing, the product is growing, and there is a need for more holistic view on all the bits and pieces, for a more cohesive vision of Speckle product moving forward as a whole, of a more holistic vision of the workflows that Speckle might need to support, but also down to small inconsistencies between different connectors, different data schemes, and interoperability within Speckle infrastructure itself. So yeah, it's really helpful to have a coordination between both the product, the team, and the users at the same time.
All right. So what are the next 3 items on the product roadmap?
So there is a Speckle roadmap and there is a QGIS Speckle roadmap. The general Speckle roadmap, I think, is the one that we've touched today several times. That's a big rename to make the terminology more familiar to the users. That's the big redesign of all the major interfaces, also to make it more connected and more intuitive and more automated. And they work on make the whole system more stable to avoid the little but annoying errors or inconsistencies. So those are 3 big steps. And in terms of the GIS connectors, the big steps would be, or the next step will be, so far, the support for non-geometry types of data that can extend to the Excel tables that somebody might want, or CSVs that somebody might want to use for analysis or even creating geometry later. Then there is also a big question with the definition of the project origin point, because the GIS software is using global coordinate system, while CAD and BIM software are using a Cartesian coordinate system. And we have found some ways to manage that so far, either by creating custom coordinate reference systems centered at your location, or create some kind of offset that will move your object, keeping your existing required coordinate reference system. But that's only working one way now, from GIS to the others. And what we want to look into is coordinate better the definition of the origin point between the other software, so they can read each other's definition of those origin and coordinate better. And the third step.
Sorry, I have to cut in there. If you guys solve that, everybody will love you. I mean, it's the bane of the industry, this problem of going between coordinate systems in different software packages. So that's really important.
I mean, we have tested one workflow with Blender GIS so far. Even though the Blender doesn't support switch between the coordinate system, once you are using, let's say, a Blender GIS plugin, and you are uploading your shapefile or your model to Blender, it lets you choose what coordinate system you're using and allows you to create already offsets or not. And once you know what coordinate system is being used, you can use that to receive Blender data in QGIS. So that's the first connector so far that has been tested with that back and forth transfer. In the other with the other connectors, you can already, if you want to send from QGIS, it's no problem anymore because there's 2 solutions that cover in most of use cases. If you want to send to QGIS, for now, you also can actually select the offsets to move the model even before receive. So I would be really happy to hear use cases that's not covering, to make it even more convenient. But yeah, please feel free to test it out.
Sure. So there's one more question, but I realized you did make an offer of a brief demo, and we do have a couple more minutes. So if you still have the time.
So this demo actually fits really well into the last point of the last item on the roadmap that I was about to talk about to cover. So I hope you can see the QGIS interface. That's the widget with the Speckle plugin. And basically what I have in here in the file is literally all the data downloaded from the open sources. One is from Quick OSM. These are the buildings with all the attributes possible from OpenStreetMaps. And the terrain and satellite images are also downloaded from the XYZ tiles, which are the maps and terrain and Google Satellite. Those services basically let you use the dynamic tiles, and then you can cut out and save a certain area as individual raster file. So those are basically very easily accessible pieces of data. And what the recent upgrades to the Speckle connector is when you not only want to send just a flat raster file and flat polygons of the buildings, but you might also want to create directly a context model out of it. So there is a function to add the transformations to it. And the transformations I am applying here. I've chosen a smaller piece of data because a video call plus the recording plus will take time, and the people will get bored waiting for the uploading. So the transformation that I have chosen is setting raster file as a texture for elevation layer, while choosing the elevation layer as well. So we have the digital elevation model called clip terrain, which is this file here, and we have the clip satellite that we would like to use as a texture on top of the elevation. And second transformation that I want to use is the building polygons extruded by the property called height. That the property can be already present in the OSM data, or you can add it by yourself. Extrude polygons by selecting attribute and project on 3D elevation. So these are the 2 transformations that I applied, and those are 2 layers that I would like to send. And now let's see. So it's converting the layers one by one, and hopefully we'll see the result already online in a couple of seconds.
So that dialog you had up for the transformation, that is part of Speckle, is it? Or is that a function of QGIS?
No, it's not. It's a part of Speckle.
Okay, cool.
So
great.
Here is basically all the buildings that are left are those that can be projected on the elevation. This is the elevation, and this is the satellite image that basically used as a texture for that elevation. Yeah. I have a bigger model of it.
Wow.
So if I was to send all of it, that would look like this.
Yeah. So it's extruding, or it's placing the center of that polygon on the surface. That's why a part of it goes below, I suppose.
Yes, the lowest point.
Oh, the lowest point. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Well, nice simple demo going to the web viewer. but you could just as well pull that into other software, I suppose.
Yep.
Cool.
And if the project center is set properly, either as a custom CRS or as offsets, that model would be received in Rhino or Revit immediately in the center.
Yep. That's great. I need to spend some time playing around myself now. Yeah. I hope that also inspires everybody else. Cool. Well, another group that I am in general trying to inspire with this podcast is mentioned in the final question. So in the UK, it's possible to undertake a geospatial apprenticeship. So what qualities, skills, or ambitions should an apprentice have to do well at Speckle?
That's also a tricky question. I'm not very well of requirements for geospatial apprenticeship, especially in the UK. But from what I see at Speckle, that people have a completely different set of technical skills as well as domain knowledge. But somehow together it turns into an amazing product and amazing collaboration environment. I'm sorry if the answer would be too generic, but that's...
It's fine if it's generic. Some people don't mention anything technical. They just talk about attitude, anything really. If it's just the vibe, that's okay.
Yeah, it's the vibe, definitely, but also what I have noticed is that everyone has kind of obsession with what they do. They're very determined to resolve the problems they resolve and have a vision of what to do next. And it can be very low level technical details, like very annoying little bugs, but also solid inter-software or inter-organizational workflows.
No, that's great. Obsession gets you a long way, regardless of your intellect or degree of it. So yeah, good answer. Amazing. Thanks very much, Kate.
Thanks for having me.
As with all of the guests, I feel like that's just the start. Yeah, definitely, I'd love to give it a try. I'll get on the forum and let you guys know how I get on, especially with the incredibly specific use case that I kept going on about in this episode. So yeah, thanks for your patience with that. Are there any ways that users can reach out to the organization, any social media handles people should keep an eye on?
Yes, absolutely. There are three main channels that user can reach out. Is the Speckle.community, which is a community forum, literally answering all possible questions from the community. But that's mainly for people who are already trying and have issues. If you are only starting, that's a main website, speckle.systems. And from Speckle.systems, you can find the blog posts, the tutorials, the installation guidelines, and you can also, if you're a developer, you can go to GitHub, fork the code, or push your PRs, and there is different ways depending on what your goal is.
Sure. Okay, great. Needless to say, all of those will be in the show notes. And yeah, hope you see some more people on the forum as a result of this. So thanks very much for coming on.
Thank you.